Hi everyone, it's great to be with you again. Welcome to our second Facebook Live with the governor. That's me. We're here at the governor's residence in Salt Lake City, or the mansion as it's referred to. I have to laugh. As we pulled up today, there's a wild turkey in the yard of the mansion. Now, I have not lived in downtown Salt Lake City until very recently. I don't think wild turkeys in Salt Lake are a thing that happens very often. I could be wrong about that, but they are very common where I live in Sanpete County, and in fact, Sanpete County is known for its not just wild turkeys, of course, but it's domestic turkeys. We have a large turkey processing plant there, and so I thought it was ironic or apropos that we would have a turkey here. I don't know who brought it, if they're just trying to welcome us to the neighborhood or making us feel better, but it's very interesting to see a wild turkey here. So all of that being said, it's great to be with you again. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to spend it with us. Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about the legislative session and then some more about our COVID response, the pandemic, kind of where we are, what's happening with vaccines, and lots of really, really good news. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with the legislative session, it lasts for 45 days. It starts usually the third week in January, although we changed the Constitution. They started a little bit earlier this year than normal. And it only lasts for 45 days. And in 45 days, the legislature does an incredible amount of work. We have 104 legislators, 75 in the House of Representatives, and 29 in the Senate. And during that time, they passed generally over 500 bills, well over 500 bills. This year, it was a little lighter year. They barely went over 500, about 503 or 504, somewhere in there. Now that lasts for 45 days, so ended the first week in March, which is great news for everyone, especially legislators. But what you may not know is that I'm not done at that point. I have a 65-day session. I have 20 days to go through every single bill, to comb through it, read it, talk to my staff, get feedback from citizens and associations and stakeholders about whether I should sign or veto those bills. I actually have one other option that I'll talk about in just a second. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 19 days. Tomorrow is the deadline, but we have finished most of the bills. We've got a little bit more to do tomorrow, but we're pretty much done. And I thought it might be worth it to talk about maybe a couple of the bills that we went through and vetoed, and a couple maybe that were controversial, and then a few more. So in the veto pile, I had mentioned in my State of the State address that I told legislators that I would likely be vetoing more bills than some of my predecessors, and that was okay, and that they would likely override some of my vetoes, and that was okay too. That's part of the process, and certainly something that we expect. Now, all of that being said, I ended up not vetoing as many bills as I expected for some very good reason. I've been doing this now, I think this is my 9th session. So I started in the House of Representatives, then I was Lieutenant Governor for almost 8 years, and of course now the Governor for my first session. And this was by far the most collaborative session I've ever been involved with. And I think that's a really good thing. I think it's good for the citizens of the state of Utah. We're all on the same team. We work closely together, and this time we worked closer than ever. And that meant some good things. I had some bills that I thought were problematic that were on my veto list, and the legislature agreed with me that they were problematic, and they didn't pass. They either were killed in committee or didn't make it through the last week and the final day of the session, or passed one body passed the House and didn't pass the Senate, or vice versa. And so I really want to thank the legislature for their great work on those bills. There were also several bills that I was concerned about that the legislature engaged with us and listened to our concerns and made some significant changes to a point where we were able to support those bills and sign them. And so overall, there are always bills that people get really upset about, that the media focuses on. And I always tell people, don't judge a legislative session by the bill you don't like, especially when they don't get through. Sometimes somebody introduces a bill or it goes to a committee, and even if it passes out of committee but doesn't go any further, and those tend to dominate the session. But I tell people to judge the session by what actually passes and gets signed into law, and then look at the entire body of work. And I think this time, I think most people would agree that this was a very good session for the citizens of the state of Utah, and I want to thank the legislators for that. But there were a couple bills that I vetoed. So the first one I vetoed yesterday was SB 228, and this is kind of known as the social media bill. Now, it's a bill that is aimed to regulate the way that media platforms they review content and they monitor their content, and they sometimes prohibit people from speaking, or they delete content, those types of things. Now, I think we all agree that social media is presenting some enormous challenges to our state and our nation. We've never had a medium quite like that. Now, we believe in First Amendment rights, and that's so important to me, that citizens have the ability to speak their mind. That's critical to the foundation of our country. We also believe in private property rights, and that private companies have the ability to do what they want. And of course, Facebook and Google and these other companies are not the government, so they do have a right to prohibit speech. But we're not sure exactly how that intersection works right now. And also, we've also seen how divisive that these social media platforms can be, and we do need content moderation, especially when there's anonymity involved. It makes it a toxic place where people can be attacked, and of course we've seen some of what's happened in our country over the past several months and years that I don't think any of us are proud of or excited about. And so this was one attempt by the legislature to try to change some of that. However, I felt that it was likely unconstitutional. As we talked to, I am an attorney, but talked to other constitutional scholars and looked at it. And also, this is something that is bigger than just Utah, obviously, and that we need to work together on. And the good news is that legislators, even those that were the bill sponsors, understood and actually encouraged me, said, okay, we've sent a message now. These social media companies are now coming to the table to negotiate and figure out a better way. Go ahead and veto this. We'll work on it during the year. We'll work with other states as well, and see if we can't find out a better way to help manage this, to protect the values that we all hold so dear. There is a little bit of irony. I have to point out that the bill sponsor in the Senate was Senator Mike McKell, who is actually married to my sister. So yes, he is my brother-in-law, and yes, the very first bill I vetoed as governor was my brother-in-law's bill, and so that will make for some interesting Sunday dinners and family reunions. But Senator McKell was actually really great and easy to work with, and I look forward to working with him and the Senate President and others who are engaged in this bill as we move forward. Just a couple more, and I'll go fairly quickly on these. House Bill 98 was a bill that was aimed partially at our affordable housing crisis, which absolutely has to be taken seriously. It puts some restrictions on what cities can require when it comes to the aesthetics of homes that drive up the cost of homes. Also puts some restrictions on the time that cities have to actually go and inspect homes, before which, if they don't meet those time frames, that an outside third-party contractor could actually perform the home inspection. So the idea there is to drive down the cost of housing and prevent delays that also drive up the cost of housing and the ability for those in the housing market to get into their homes quickly and to add additional supply. Now, after the bill was passed, we received word from FEMA that there were some problematic provisions in the bill that might impact a flood insurance for the state of Utah. Obviously, that's a concern for everyone, and so today I vetoed that bill with the expectation that we will take those parts out, and during a special session, which we will likely have a special session of the legislature in May, as an aside, because of some of the federal legislation that was recently passed dealing with pandemic response and funding that is coming to the states. And again, the legislature controls the purse strings, and so they have to decide how those funds are going to be spent. Because that money is going to be coming into the state of Utah over the next couple months, we will call them back into session to deal with those funds, and this is an issue that they can deal with as well. Just a couple other quick ones. We had one dealing with the regulation of hemp, the hemp industry in the state, and as that bill was passed, there were 2 or 3 provisions that were problematic and would potentially hurt the state of Utah with the FDA, as well as our ability to regulate the hemp flower, and with our medicinal marijuana program that we have in the state, there would be some issues there, some issues around dosing as well that need to be fixed. This is another one that we plan on fixing in a special session that will be called again in May, and take care of that so that we can allow hemp producers in the state to do even more and participate in that economy. Now, we got some other questions about a couple bills that I did sign. One of those was which is HB 294, which is called the Pandemic Endgame. This is the one I get asked the most often about, and it involves the end of or at least a partial end of the mask mandate in the state of Utah. Now, there is good news out there right now. The good news is that our case numbers continue to come down. We've seen declines every week during this year as our numbers continue to come down precipitously. However, a week and a half ago or so, our numbers plateaued a little bit. They were still declining, just not at the rates that we had seen. Although now it looks like over the past 3 days, we've seen again significant declines in our cases. Cases now are looking much more like they did in August after that first wave, and even some of our numbers, our percent positivity, and others are as low as they've been since May, and that's really good news. And so we're also seeing vaccines go up significantly. We're getting more and more supply of vaccines. Really proud of our partners in Utah who are getting those vaccines out. Last week, I think we got up to 5th in the nation for getting doses in arms, which is just incredible, and we're so excited about that and what's happening. And again, we made the decision to vaccinate our elderly population and our most at-risk populations first, which means that as those case numbers come down, what we expect to see is that hospitalization and fatality rates will come down even faster. So that's the good news. Now, the legislature has the ability to govern these things. When we've been using, as governors across the country, we've been using these emergency powers. What most people don't realize is that emergency powers are legislative powers. So this is a little bit un-American for sure. We left the country whose executive had lots of powers, and we made sure that we had, again, a legislature who had powers, an executive had powers, and there was a separation between them and a check and balance between them that was so important. But emergency powers are one of the rare instances where the legislature has said, we're going to give our powers to the governor, to the executive, or the president, because we can't respond in a quick manner. So we need an executive who can do that, and that's what we've been doing. Now, of course, those powers were not generally intended to last over the course of a year or longer, which we have been in the pandemic. So there was another bill also that we worked with the legislature on to help even that out a little bit. So after 30 days, we have to start engaging with the legislature on those, which is great. We should be doing that anyway, and they have that ability right now anyway to call themselves into special session. This just formalizes that relationship. However, as we brought them into this session, they decided, and we negotiated, and we tried to get as much as possible, that they wanted to end the mask mandate, but not for large gatherings. So anything over 50 would still require a mask. And not in our schools yet. We're not at a point where they felt comfortable doing that, but getting rid of the mask mandate everywhere else. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't wear a mask. In fact, we still encourage you to wear a mask, especially if you have not been vaccinated, and so that you can protect yourself and protect those around you. And the businesses can still require masks as well, and many of them are doing that. And so this I don't think that this will be a huge difference from what we've seen before. Before we had the mask mandate, we had lots of people wearing masks. After the mask mandate, it did tick up for sure. We did see an increase, and we hope that people will continue to be safe and wear their masks after April 10th. But that's why I felt comfortable signing that bill. They had decided that they wanted to end it right at the end of the session. So that first week in March, we negotiated with them to get another month, which would allow us to get more vaccines into arms. They agreed to that, and so that's why we signed the bill on April 10th. But again, with where cases are right now, we still encourage people to wear masks until everybody gets a chance to be vaccinated. And the good news is that's going to happen sooner rather than later, because today was the day that we opened vaccines up to any adult in the state who wants to get a vaccine. We know you're trying. Some of you have been able to schedule those. I'm really excited. I'm going to be able to get mine tomorrow, and so Abby will get hers too. We'll be coming to you live tomorrow at our press conference. We'll get it there. I think we're doing it in Utah County in Spanish Fork, and we're so excited for that. We're hoping you're getting yours too. If you can't find an appointment right now, be patient. We're getting an increased level of vaccines over the next couple weeks, and more appointments will be opening up. So that's why we signed that. Now, I promised that there was a third thing I could do that I would talk to you about, and that is letting a law go into effect without my signature. Now, again, signing the bill, it goes into law. Vetoing the bill, it doesn't go into law unless the legislature overrides my veto with a 2/3 majority, which they'll have an opportunity to do on those vetoes. But there is this third option, and that is I just don't do anything. And if I don't do anything, it still becomes law. And this is generally used symbolically. It may not be worth vetoing, or a governor may know that the veto will be overridden, and so it's not worth going through that process. But it's a chance for a governor to talk about something that maybe they disagree with. They don't think it was a great idea, but it's not worth vetoing for one of those reasons. So we had a couple of those. One was SB 167, which is a bill that deals with Utah's motion picture incentive program. Now, Utah's been very fortunate to have many motion pictures, movies that have been filmed here. We have TV series that have been filmed here, and those are really good for Utah's economy. It employs a lot of people, and it's an important industry, and we want to support that industry. However, when we look at the incentives that go to the film industry, the return on investment that come from those types of incentives, again, using taxpayer dollars to incentivize films to come here and film here, the return on investment isn't great. We don't see a good return. In fact, we often see a negative return when we've studied in the past. Now, it's not a huge deal. It's not a huge amount of money in the grand scheme of the budget, but it is an issue, and it's one that I'm concerned about. Now, there is an argument that by filming here, that's good, even if we don't have a good return on the taxpayer investment in that incentive right away, that there's this halo effect that comes from people who watch the movie, know that it was filmed here in Utah, see how beautiful it is, come here and vacation and spend their money and pay taxes here. All of those things are arguably very good, and we think we should look at all of those things, do a much bigger study on that. So I decided to let the bill go into effect, but not sign it, just to send a message to the legislature that we really want to take a hard look at this and study it more. There's another bill that was a tax levy for animal control. This is something that came out of Davis County. It allows them to add a tax levy. It was negotiated between the mayors and the county commissioners so that they could help with animal control. Now, the good news is that it is neutral to taxpayers. It's not an increase. Every time we add one of these tax levies over time, there is a potential for a tax increase. There's also a potential that every time we have a problem, we'll just add a new tax levy instead of dealing with it with the general funds the way we should. So that concerned me a little bit. Again, this is something that Davis County had worked really hard on and that they needed, and so I felt comfortable allowing it to go into law. But I wanted to send a message that this is something we're concerned about and that we want them to watch. The third one I let go into law with without signature. And I don't know if any of this is interesting to you at home, but some of you who think this stuff is wonky and really enjoy it, I hope it is interesting. But the third one was a bill that changed the time frame in a primary election for voters to affiliate with a party and participate in that election. Now this is something that is a little bit controversial. We've always had voter deadlines when you have to register or you have to affiliate with a party. In Utah, we have it's up to the party whether they have a closed primary or not. The Republican Party does have a closed primary, in that you have to be a registered Republican to vote in that primary. Now, the argument, and of course, I just went through an election where lots of people participated, lots of people changed their affiliation. They were either unaffiliated and changed it to Republican to vote in that primary, or maybe they were Democrats or some other party who changed to be a Republican so they could vote in the gubernatorial primary or in other primaries. Now, there's nothing theoretically wrong with that, and this bill still allows you to do that. You just have to do it earlier than the time of the election, or a week or two before the election. You actually have to do it a couple months before the election. Now, the good side of that is it really helps candidates who are campaigning, so they know who they're campaigning to, know who the voters are, who the members of that party are. I know parties like this type of bill because, again, it prevents, we sometimes hear that other parties might switch over to try to sway an election that is a closed primary. And so, but here, the lieutenant governor, when I was lieutenant governor, and Lieutenant Governor Henderson and I, we really believe in trying to get more people to vote. And of course, do it legally, always following the rules. But we believe that when people participate in the process, we get better outcomes. So this doesn't change that much. It just means that we have to do a better job of letting people know when those deadlines are. And we will do that. The lieutenant governor is committed to doing that and giving people an opportunity to participate. And so I ended up not signing that because I wanted to send this message that we want to encourage voter participation in the state. But the bill isn't too problematic, and we feel that people will adapt to it as we move forward and get good information out of there. Okay, so all in all, I'm very pleased with the legislative session. It wasn't perfect. I don't love all the bills and laws that were passed, but that's a cool thing about our state and our country. We're very resilient. We've passed some not great bills in the past, and we've made it through. We always find a way to adapt, and more importantly, we passed some really, really good legislation this year, some things I'm proud of. We had a historic investment in education. That's such a big deal, especially coming out of this pandemic. Our economy is doing so well. We were able to put money back into education, almost $500 million in new funding. That will go to teachers. It will go to at-risk students, students who are struggling through the pandemic. It will help in so many different ways, and I'm grateful for the legislature for prioritizing that. We also had record investment in infrastructure. That's great for our state, and that will help us with the crunch that we have as the fastest growing state in the nation. Making sure that we have our air quality is good, investing in our roads, our water, broadband infrastructure, which we know through the pandemic has become so important. All of these things are going to help Utah to become better for generations to come. So I love those investments. I also love that we invested in our people through education, and also through higher education and through our workforce development programs, so that we can help people who have lost their jobs, or people who have a low income to get re-educated, to skill up, and to be able to fill some of the jobs that we have right now that are open that pay so well. That's important, investing in our people. And then we were able to return some money to the people of Utah as well, with $100 million in tax cuts that were directed specifically at veterans, at our seniors, and at families. And so again, there were so many good things that happened out there, and I hope you'll take some time to review some of the great legislation that was passed. Okay, Well, we still have some time to talk about. We asked you to submit questions, and we got a lot of questions. So thank you. I apologize that we won't be able to get to all of them tonight, but I do want to make sure that we answer some of those before we sign off, because we have a Jazz game at 8 o'clock, and I know you're all going to be watching as the Jazz take on the Brooklyn Nets tonight at home for the first time in a long time. So here are some of the questions that said, here's the first one. I believe that you said that you signed 400 or 500 bills into law so far this year. Can you tell us in about a paragraph why we need this many bills signed into law so far this calendar year? This is from Cato. This is a great question, and one that I asked myself about all the time. Do we really need that many bills? The answer is no. We don't need that many bills. And I always encourage the legislature to pass fewer bills. However, I do want to say this in their defense. First of all, most of these bills, a significant majority of the bills, sometimes as close as 90%. Now we haven't looked at them this year, but close to 90% of them pass unanimously or near unanimously, with only 1 or 2 no votes. That's a big deal, and it's a big deal because it's bipartisan support. Democrats, by the way, even though we're a supermajority Republican state, Democrats do very well in passing legislation here in this state. There have been some studies done around this, and that show that Democrats actually do really well, better than many other states where there is this disproportionate majority. And so that's good. The other piece of this is that we have a part-time legislature, and I love that. That's a good thing, because these are regular people who have real jobs and real backgrounds, which makes them an expert in some things. You know, we have police officers, and we have teachers, and we have attorneys, and we have doctors, and we have every type of industry and background is represented in our legislature. So they're experts on some things, they're not expert on others. We also have a very short amount of time, which means that they have to try to get everything done then. And that means that we are going to make mistakes. And that happens in a full-time legislature or a part-time. It always happens. Most of the bills that are passed are fixing things that were passed last year, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago. They're short bills. They're things that we found that were working and we want to improve on, or things that were broken and we want to get rid of or fix. And that happens all of the time. So it's a little, I think it's a little, when you hear 500, you think that's insane, and it is a lot. But not all of them are kind of the big substantive bills, and so I do think that we do a very good job. But I would love it if we had much fewer. I think around 300 bills would be kind of the perfect number, but I'm not sure we'll get there anytime soon. Okay, let's see. We've got a couple others here. Let me pull this up. Okay. Utah's economy has rebounded strongly, as shown by our low unemployment rate. The events and hospitality industry is the major exception, which is correct. With 12,500 jobs lost last month, the job losses are continuing in rural and urban Utah. How does Utah plan to support this crucial industry over the next 9 to 12 months? And how much of the new stimulus money will be directed at this industry? Who will be responsible for creating programs to administer this? These are all really, really good questions. We have... Utah's economy is doing very well, by the way. Our unemployment at 3% right now, which is almost identical to where it was before the pandemic started, which is crazy after a year and what we've been through. We were at like 2.5%, which was the lowest in the nation when it hit. We're tied for the lowest in the nation right now at 3%. But there are these industries, the events and hospitality industry, hotels that are restaurants as well, that are still really struggling. And we have plans. We've used state money, we've used some federal money to help with these groups. Of course, there's been significant stimulus, the PPP loans as well, that were very helpful. But this latest round of stimulus has some really significant dollars for this industry. And that will be coming. We also did get some more state money for some of these programs coming out of the legislative session. Now the big question is, how will this money be administered? The legislature does hold the purse strings. They have to make those decisions. And so I actually met with my team just this afternoon to go over a whole bunch of recommendations on ways that we can use make sure we're investing in the right areas so that it's a lot of money. I think it was a mistake to have this much, but that's a discussion for another time. It is coming, so we want to use it wisely. We will be making recommendations to the legislature, much like we do during the budget in December and leading into January. We'll be doing the same thing right now with the legislature, and then again calling them back into session. This bill that came out of Congress gave an enormous amount of latitude to the Secretary of the Treasury to make rules around how this money can be used. So we actually have to wait for the Secretary to give us some guidance. Now, when this happened last March with the very first stimulus under the Trump administration, it took about a month for the Secretary of the Treasury to give us guidance, and then that guidance was changing for months and is still changing. But we expect it will probably take about a month. So sometime in April, we'll get some more guidance from the Treasury, and then during the interim session in May, we anticipate calling the legislature into session to make those decisions about where this money is going to be spent. So again, if you have thoughts and ideas about how you would like it spent, I really encourage you to reach out to your legislator, your representative and senator, and let them know how this is important. And of course, we will be focusing on these industries that are hardest hit. That's the piece of the stimulus that I actually agree with, is that we should be focusing on those industries and families that were hardest hit. This is much, much broader than that, but we will work to make sure we make the right decisions there. We've got time for just maybe a couple other questions. We've gotten some questions around masks in schools, which is again a really good question. So we're vaccinating as fast as we possibly can. Unfortunately, what we saw early on in the pandemic, and specifically with the second surge, that it was really driven by schools and by college students as well, and then that got out into into families and spread into our elderly population, and that's where we saw a spike in cases. We saw a spike, of course, in hospitalizations and in deaths. Now, we are very optimistic right now about where things are. When I talk about our senior population getting vaccinated, those over the age of 70 right now who are most at risk at hospitalization and death, we've got well over 80% of that population vaccinated, which is great news. And from 65 to 70, we're over 70% now and climbing. However, that means that there's still 20% that are not vaccinated in that population, and we're getting to them as quickly as possible. We also have people with underlying conditions that we opened up for a few weeks ago, so they're getting through. They've got their first dose of the vaccine, but not their second dose yet. We've had teachers that have been now getting vaccinated. We prioritize them. Many of them are still working on their second dose before they're considered fully vaccinated, and again, protecting the most at risk. So that's where we are right now with schools. The recommendation is, because they're in such tight quarters for such a long time, that they continue to wear masks. Now, I'm very excited for the time when we won't have to do that, and that time is coming. It's coming sooner than I think most people realize, but for right now, we've been asked to keep those in place, and we're going to keep those in place, and students have been so great. They really have. As I mentioned, I have one in high school and a daughter in middle school, and it's been really incredible to see how great they have been doing. And this is what's so important, I think, that we notice. There are so many states where kids are not back in the classroom yet, and we've been back in the classroom, with one exception, since the end of August and the 1st of September. And that means that our kids have had that in-person education, which we have learned is so critical. The masks have prevented a mass spread in those schools. We've increased testing there. We've allowed our kids to do sports and extracurricular activities, and dances are going forward this year. We're so close, and the superintendents have said, hey, let's just keep going. We're almost there. Let's get through this. We'll be okay. And we are. Again, there are reasons to be optimistic. The next question, will you broadcast live receiving your COVID-19 vaccination for all of Utah to see? And the answer is yes. We will do this tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, as part of our regular scheduled weekly news conference starting at 11 o'clock tomorrow. And we'll have our doses ready there. So we'll do the news conference, and then we'll sit down right next to the podium, and we'll get our vaccines. And I just I guess maybe we'll just finish here. I want to thank everybody for your patience over this past year. It's been a really a really long year. It's been a difficult year for so many of you, and people who have lost loved ones, people who have been sick. We have long haulers who are still suffering the effects of the illness, and we don't know why or for how long. And we were told that vaccines could take 18 months at least, maybe 2 years, and perhaps longer, and we wouldn't know how effective they were, and would life ever get back to normal. And here we are on the precipice of that. We have every reason to be incredibly optimistic. The end is in sight. So many people are getting vaccinated, and again, I want you to be optimistic. You've been fully vaccinated. Yeah, spend time around other people who've been fully vaccinated, people who aren't at risk. You don't have to wear your masks around them. Do things, have your get-togethers. All of those things are fine. We want to encourage people to get the vaccine because that's how we get out of this. And as case numbers continue to go down, as hospitalizations continue to go down, as deaths continue to go down, and as vaccinations continue to go up, we are on the edge of this. We're almost out. Please know how grateful we are to all of you. Thanks for making Utah a special place. Thanks for allowing me to be your governor. It's been an incredible 3 months. We've loved it. We've learned so much together, and we're really excited to see what post-pandemic Utah looks like. Thank you for helping us along the way. I hope you have a great night, and go Jazz.